All right, so it seems I accidentally hit the button to stop recording. That was my bad. I was talking about the Disney series, and it was the Acolyte was the one that I was thinking about. That I mean, it just got reviewed bombed and was pretty bad. I mean, I'm not going to really get into the whole argument for or against it because it just gets ludicrous. I mean, you're getting into another realm. I've always been one. I mean, I don't. Like I said, like the Last Jedi, I thought was horrible just by the way they handled the characters and did everything. But I don't get into the whole politics of stuff. I mean, it's either a good movie, good series, or a bad series. And to me, the Acolyte, I haven't seen it. I just haven't that and Skeleton Crew. I just haven't had any. I mean, what do you say? Just any want to see those. It was the same thing with Andor. I watched, I think, the first two episodes of Andor, and it just didn't appeal to me. It came off more Star Trek-ish, I guess you could say, than than anything. It's like yeah, Star Trek has always been more based on reality. I mean, there have been some aspects of fantasy in Star Trek, but it's more based on reality. And Star Wars was always fantasy. And to me, it just seemed like Andor was more like going on that reality base, which I mean, I guess I can kind of understand, but again, it felt like I was watching like Star Trek or some different series, and I just couldn't keep up with it anymore. Um, but yeah, I mean, to me, Mandalorian has been the best. Um, I'd probably maybe say Andor just because it received really well would probably be the second best series. Ahsoka, even though it got weird at the end there, would be the third. Obi-Wan was just I mean I still don't know what to think of that one. I mean that right there would be the fourth. Boba Fett was just straight bad. So that'd be the fifth, and then I haven't seen these two. I haven't seen Bad Batch. I haven't seen the Clone Wars. Like I said, I mean the animated stuff and all that. I just never got into. So it is what it is. And speaking of the space stuff, and I don't know if I'm gonna be repeating myself there on some of that Star Wars stuff because again, I hit the kill switch. I hit the kill switch button to stop recording. So this is why it's probably coming in two different series, but two different episodes. But we've had more UFO sightings out there. Um, the latest one being in Washington D.C., which looks so fake. It's not even funny, but yet you got people that believe this nonsense is straight up real. Okay, so this is it right here. Mute this. First off, look at this. We're in January now. This is a football game. That should be your first red flag. High school football is done right now. They've already had their championship stuff either in November or December. I mean, even the small colleges, I'm pretty sure, have already had their playoffs and maybe even their championship games. So that should be your first red flag. It's at a football game. Secondly, the people aren't even looking at it. The people, if you look, they're looking down on the field. They're looking out towards here down on the field. They're not looking up. So you're telling me there's a UFO up here, but nobody's looking at it. So this guy zooms in, which was probably clearly a plane, and then they added, it almost looks like a cow onto it. And again, nobody's looking up at it. This guy's not looking up at it. But watch what it does when it moves. Watch when we come back here. See it moving with the camera? The camera's not moving with it. It's moving with the camera. So when this thing goes back to when the camera goes back to this guy here, watch as it moves with the camera. See that? Moves with the camera. Moves with the camera. And then comes across this is fake. This is so bad, and yet there's people. Look, it's a cow or a cougar. I don't know what the hell that is. I mean, and people are trying to pass this off as if it's like if it's real, which blows my. Woohoo! Cheers! I scored a touchdown. And yet you have people that will believe that this is real. They'll sit there and watch this stuff and believe that it is real. The same thing with, I mean, look how fake this is. It's supposed to be in Germany. I mean, that thing's fake as hell. But yeah, you're going to have people that believe that. You're going to have people that believe that it's real. This one here, over Florida. It looks like somebody just took street lights and superimposed it on something else. And this, I mean, this looks like the same thing. Like, it looks like the same three lights that were on that one in Florida that somebody, and he wants you to debunk this video. My man saying, please debunk this. Okay, Panther Mike 182, it's fake. It is fake. It is not real. I don't think that a guy named Mike 18 or Panther Mike 182 is going to be breaking news on UFOs over wherever the heck this is, and CNN not. Oh, it's supposed to be over JFK Airport. Okay, yeah. One of the probably the biggest major airport in the world, and nobody but Panther Mike is reporting UFOs over it. Okay, good job, Panther Mike. God, this is just where Twitter's going. I mean, and again, I get that Twitter is a medium of the social media, that it's now a place to make money. It is not a place to really to spread news. It's not a place to inform people. It is a place to get paid. And I do believe that if you have a blue check, you can receive money. I think, and I might have to apply for it. I'm not exactly sure. That you can receive money by interaction with your tweets, as far as likes or comments or whatever. And it's just like YouTube, or it's just like Twitch or whatever. The more people you have watching, or the more people you have interacting, the better your income revenues will be. And that's basically what Twitter is now. X is now. It's just a clip, and it's a clip farm to get comments and likes. It's not anything but garbage. I mean, I can't express to you how garbage Twitter has become in the last couple of years. Which, I mean, God, you guys remember the 90s, man? So that's the time period I grew up. I was born in 81. I'm 43. I was born in 81. So from like the late 80s through the 90s was when I grew up. And I saw something somewhere, and I'll get into this in a minute, the whole generation nonsense. But I think it was the Gen X people were trying to claim that they were the last generation that grew up without something in their hand, which is not true, because I'm part of the millennial generation, and we grew up without devices in our hand. The only device that I can remember excuse me, having in our hand was the Game Boy. And let me tell you, that thing was a brick. It was like this thick and like that long. And you were not, I mean, it weighed about 7 pounds. You were not carrying that around everywhere. One, the battery life was garbage on it. But two, you were afraid that you might drop it and break it, or drop it and lose it, or somebody would steal it. So you weren't carrying the Game Boy around. I think like the most I played with that Game Boy was when I either first got it from Christmas or my birthday, whenever it was. And then it just became a bookshelf, dust collector. It just, the games weren't the best. It was fun for the time period, but then after that, it just wasn't anything. And cell phones weren't really a thing probably until you're going into 99, maybe 2000. I think I got my first cell phone in 2000. Let me tell you, the only thing that thing would do is receive and give calls. It maybe had one game, Snake, on it, and that was it. I mean, these things weren't stuck in your hand every day. It was, honestly, I probably did not need the cell phone at that time because it was pointless. But like cell phones, even at that time, were just big and obnoxious. People didn't carry them around everywhere unless they were a lawyer, I mean, basically a lawyer or somebody that was, I mean, super important. There was no reason to care. Plus, the friggin' deals for at those times for like service was outrageous. So for Gen X to try to claim that they were the last generation to grow up hands free, that's a bunch of BS, man. That's one thing again I'll get into with the generation stuff. Generation X can shove it, dude. You guys think you're so better than every other generation. You're one of the worst ones out there. I need to stop saying generations because I don't believe in generations, but you're one of the worst groups out there. Bunch of pansies. But yeah, man. I remember 94 that's when I was 13. That was like the first summer that I had to myself. My parents they got separated in 91, and they were finally divorced like a year or so later. And so during the summers, we would do this thing where we would spend 6 weeks at our dad's during that time period. And all that time, we would spend down in Panama City Beach, which was great. Growing up around that area in the 90s was great. Um, but during the weeks, like my brothers were in year-round school still. It was still a thing at the time. We're still in year-round school. So I was basically given run to the house during the day. It was just, even in at night too. My dad would basically just say, "Hey, you can stay up as late as you want to. You're old enough now. Just don't make a mess. Don't be loud. Um, but just whatever." So like my nights during that summer of '94 were so great. It's when I discovered Conan O'Brien. That first when he was probably been on by about a year at that point, but he was still that like fighting, punching up, um, late night show. He still looked like a baby. Had the great entrance. Had that. I mean, if you can find like episodes of Conan O'Brien in '94, like do it. Like the entrance, the theme music, and everything at that time was so great. And it was where he wasn't getting the greatest guest in the world. Like he would getting actors that were on their way out of their career, or a lot of like TV actors, models. He would get some musicians that were on the come up that maybe weren't, that Leno and Letterman weren't taking at that time. So he got a lot of bands that were on the come up that became great. But it was just this stupid, funny, cult kind of show that you either watched it or you didn't. And like I remember, there was only a few kids at school when I got back into school that fall that watched Conan, and we just thought we were the coolest kids because nobody knew what we were talking about. That was our series, that was our show, that Conan O'Brien show. God, it was so great. I mean, I think it probably peaked around 2000, 2001, and then that's when like the cat was out of the bag and Conan became almost as popular or more popular than Jay. And you can see like it just kind of like it was just a different show from that point on. Just the stuff they got away with before he became super popular was freaking great. And besides that, it was MTV. I remember like after Conan was over, I would switch over to MTV, and you might catch like Liquid Television that was on with like Avion Flux. Of course, Beavis and Butthead might be on there, or the Max, that show with the purple and yellow dude with the big hands, big feet. And during the day, I mean, unless you had satellite, if you just had like a basic cable package, you didn't really have much. You had like HBO, you had all the regular stuff that came with it at that time. But HBO, depending on the day, you could either have a line of good movies or just crap. So just depended on what you got. So most of the time, I'd have MTV on all day, every day, while I had the house to myself. And you'd get the rock shows, you get the rap shows, you'd get the top tens. This was before TRL became a thing, which I don't think that became a thing until like 3 or 4 years later. But the reality shows had not taken over yet on there, and it was just music, just enjoyable music, just great music of the '90s. And the other thing was, man, you weren't tied to anything. You just were in your own element. It was just you. If you had the house to yourself back in those days, again, the internet was feeble at that time. The most, if you had internet at that time in '94, the most that you could do is look at headlines around the way. If you knew certain websites, you could possibly go there, but it was pretty boring. Like you would not spend a lot of time on the internet unless you were doing a project or something. So it was mainly, you know, mostly pointless. So I mean, you just had time to yourself to think and just enjoy everything that was going. I mean, not that I feel them today, but you honestly you can feel like the pressures of like today's society with the phones and the apps and everything needing to be on. Everybody needed to be in constant communication with you, or you having man like I remember me and my brothers, we would just disappear in a neighborhood for hours, and like our mom wouldn't care. She just was like, all right, well, when you hear me calling for dinner, that's when you come back in. And we would go outside and we might come back in to get a drink if you know we were thirsty or if we wanted a snack or whatever, and then we'd dip out. We'd be gone for another couple hours, and that was life, man. It wasn't your mom calling you every 5 minutes asking you where you were or texting you trying to figure out. You were just out there, man. You were in the ether, man. You were gone, and I think that on some level, I think that's what kids will never experience again, or will never have the actual experience because I get how cell phones can be good as far as like the elements of the stranger dangers and stuff like that, and emergencies. I do get that, but man, just to be able just to dip out for a few hours and your parents not be worried, them just know, yep, they're out there being kids, you know, and not not have some sort of irrational fear that the world is ending because you can't get a hold of your kid is something that it will truly be missed, and I wish could come back, but that, I mean, that's Pandora's box has been opened, right? It's already over. It's already too late. It is too late for that, there, sir. Man, speaking of just these cell phones and the grasp they have on people, this whole I was today years old thing. I think it started. I think the first time I saw it was probably about 9 years ago. I was today years old when I realized this. I was today years old when and all they are is people discovering things that 90% of the population already knows and or knew. It's not like anything earth shattering. It's like I saw one where there was like I was today years old from it was from the original Jumanji movie. They were today years old where they realized that the father also played the safari hunter. It was the same actor. And I remember it's going, yeah, but I remember that when I first saw that movie, I recognized, I mean, that's how they were playing it off. That was the whole father son dynamic aspect. I mean, how did you not see that? And one of them I saw was this one, maybe, this one made me laugh was this guy goes, I was today years old when I realized they use fake snow when making Christmas movies. So the grown ass man under the impression that they would go to cold areas, which okay, I get that. That they would find cold areas to film Christmas movies where there was actual snow. Okay, I get that thinking. I get that thinking that you would do that. But the thing is, weather is so bipolar and so hit or miss. You might show up on set one day because some movies do that. Some movies actually go to the place to film and get the snow and whatever. But you might have it there 1 or 2 days, and then for the next 3 or 4, there's no snow, or the time period after that, there's no snow. So unless you're filming in Siberia or upper echelons of Canada or Alaska or somewhere, and you build a fake little town, you're going to be hard pressed to actually land real snow all the time for a movie. It's just not going to happen. And it's one of those things, like I remember growing up in certain movies or even TV shows where they would use cotton, and it was like packed in behind the actors, on this or that, and you could tell because every now and then an actor would step on it, and you would see the snow crunch in like this and then bounce back up, down and up, down and up, and it was like, oh, it's cotton. But it was one of those that just didn't bother you because you knew this was a show or this was a movie. It wasn't going to be real. It didn't need to be real if you're watching a movie or a show. It just had to be that belief for that time period that it was there. I mean, Christ, I remember in The Wizard of Oz, And even in some of those older movies, they'd use asbestos as snow. I mean, oh, and I get they didn't know that it caused cancer and the issues, but I mean, imagine that. I mean, a lot of that stuff. Those like kids were making asbestos snowballs and throwing them at each other's faces is just wild to think about. And I mean, nowadays you get like you get like the chemical stuff, the chemical snow, which is not harmful anymore. That they spray down. You'll have other studios that actually grind ice and it churns it into snow, and they pack it and build it up. And you do have some that'll actually go to location and they'll get lucky and they'll have enough snow, or they'll film right around when the snow is. But I mean, yeah, dude, how do you not know that they use fake snow? And Hollywood is mostly fake, and you're just now shocked that they don't use real snow. I mean, that whole trend just makes the person look dumb when they go, "I was today years old when I discovered it." Well, no shit, Sherlock. I mean, what was the thought process on that one there? I mean, did you not think that that's how this worked? So yeah, they Hollywood uses fake snow. Can we please stop this annoying ass trend of "I was today years old"? It is the stupidest trend that I've seen in a long time. Can we please stop that? I mean, unless you're gonna explain what the moon is made of, or unless you're gonna explain you were today years old when you figured out the distance from here to the next universe. We don't need to know that you can pick up grass and eat it, but it'll make you sick. Plenty of us are aware of that. Plenty of us know that. I mean, we don't need to know that you discovered that the smell of markers isn't the actual smell of fruit. We know. We've been around and figured that out. Yeah, I love the younger kids that do that today year old stuff. It just makes me realize the intelligence level on a lot of these people is extremely low. So the, I spoke on this earlier, and I go into the generation thing because I don't know when this became like a big trend. It probably was in the last 10 years where they started blocking people off by the generations they grew up in, by the years. You had the baby boomers, Gen X, the millennials, and there's like extennials in the middle of Gen X and millennials. Then you had what, the Zoomers, the Alphas, the Omegas, the idiots, whatever you want to call them now. I hate, and I think it's ludicrous of this whole generations thing. One, because it's stupid. Honestly, if you're gonna break up things in division, you have to do it with technology, and you have to put it in like where you have the atomic area, the digital area, and now whatever the AI area, whatever era we're in now, and it has to encompass. Because there's this whole thing. It's like I was saying, like Generation X, and they get on my damn nerves. They think they're the coolest of the coolest. And Gen X, you are the drug pushers. You are the the most depressed, drug using, alcohol addicted people that I know. You guys are not cool because you fell down and scraped your knees and got up and just brushed it off. Believe me, there's kids of every age from here until the dawn of man that did that. You aren't special because of that, okay? Get over yourselves. Get over it quickly. But that whole I, the generation thing, I don't get the breaking it off as if like every 10 or 12 years, well, this is now the cutoff from 73 to 74, and those people are completely different just because there's a year apart. It's like that's not, again, like when Gen X sits there. First off, when I was a kid, my grandmother had told, I think, me and my brothers that we were part of this Generation X. We grew up under the assumption that, because I was born in 81, my brother was born in 83, that we were part of that, and we were actually called like Generation Slacker. We were supposed to be like the lazy kids, which come to find out, hey, kids are lazy. What do you know? Um, yeah, I remember that, and then in the last 10 years finding out, well, no, actually, you're a millennial, you take part in it. And then it was, no, actually, you're in the group of extennials. Like, I don't freaking care. Look, every kid grows up the same but different. It doesn't matter if you grew up in the 1930s or now. The only thing that changes is technology. A generation from 1970 to 1981 is no different from the generation from 1982 to 1996. They grew up basically with the same stuff. They grew up with the same thing. The difference in technology, I mean, the big difference in technology from that time period, if you still want to break this down in generations, from Generation X to millennials, the big difference was the internet. Honest to God, was when the internet became a thing. Besides that, from like the mid 70s to the mid 90s, a lot did not change. There was not a at least on the level for civilians, there was not a lot that changed. I mean, sure, stuff gets repackaged and redone and different. Video games advanced like they would normally do during that time period. Phones advanced like they would normally do in that time period. Medicines, whatever you want to say, but there was not a lot of difference between. We were still using dial tone phones, wall phones, phones that you plugged into the wall in the 90s. There wasn't any different from what they did the generation before us. It wasn't any different from what that generation before did. It was all the same. The big difference was when, if you want to change, if you want to put a time spot in something, go with technology. When the internet was invented, that's a pinpoint. So around, I know it was invented in the 80s, but it didn't come to the population till the 90s, like 92, 93, 94, whenever it was. That's where you need to pinpoint for that next group of kids of what they're growing, because those are the kids that are now growing up having that already in their world. You know, it's there. They grew up with it already being there. And then if you want to put another pin, you would probably put it when these phones began to take over, probably in the last 15 years. That would be your next pin. And that's where you have to do. It's like the people before us, you would have boats coming over to the New World. Put a pin there. Spreading across the country. The next pin that you probably really wouldn't have was probably not until the invention of electricity, and then even further, probably not until the invention of the plane, to where you could now fly distances instead of having to train or having to boat or walk or ride a horse or whatever. And then besides that, I mean, after the plane, there's nothing that really changed in society on a grand scale until you get to the internet. And I know some people are going to say, well, what about the atomic bomb? What about this or that? Yeah, that's there, but that's not something that directly affected the way people lived. You had the bomb scares of the 60s. I get that with the Cuban Missile Crisis. But that's kind of like their COVID. I don't know if we can still say it on here, but that's kind of like that. You know, you had that time period where they were all scared that the world was going to end, but then they got through it and it was whatever. We have that time period where, oh no, the world's going to end, but we got through it. It's whatever. But technology-wise, you did not have much change from the invention of the airplane until you got to the internet. You had the evolution of the technologies. The planes got better. Automobiles got better. Electronics got better. Medicines got better. Just a natural progression. But you did not have that mainstay, that solid block that went, okay, this is where everything changes, until probably you got to the internet. So to me, to break this stuff down, generation on this, generation on that, is probably just the stupidest argument you can have. What it is personalities. Personalities might be different as far as like the different age groups and different time periods they grew up. Because, yeah, I mean, you might have grown up, like in the 80s, you might have had a wilder time or this kind of time, but different 80s kids are going to have different approaches to life and how they view things. Some are going to have loved it, and they were a super jacked up kid rocking out to music. Then you're going to have those other kids that were, you know, the gothic, you know, oh, life sucks, da 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 the type. And it's the same thing that we had in the 90s. It's the same thing that they had in the 70s. The same thing that they had in the 2000s. It's not much different. So if we could stop this dumb argument or this dumb breaking down of generations and the aspect of that, it's stupid. I don't get it. I mean, leave me a comment, argue with me if you want to, but I personally think that we could do without this dumb generation breakdown of this generation is better than that generation when there's nothing extraordinarily different. There's nothing extraordinarily different at all. You had lazy people during the 40s and the 50s and 60s, just as you had lazy people in the 70s, 80s, and 90s until now. You had hardworking people in the 40s and 50s and 60s, just as you had hardworking people in the 70s and 80s and 90s, just as you have now. It's personalities. It's not a generational thing. It's a personality of a person, of a human being. Let's stop doing this nonsense of what generation is better or what generation is worse, because they all have their positives and we all have our negatives, and that's just how it is. As I said, I accidentally hit the cancel button, which was my bad. It was the hot button on my keyboard. So this particular, I'm gonna try to tape them together. I don't know if I'll be able to, but if not, it's just gonna be two. There'll be two podcasts up for today. So if you can check both of those out. If not, hey, they'll be there. Hopefully you'll watch both of them. I will be back again. We're going to do this again tomorrow. We're going to have some, more topics, talk about some more things, see if I can find anything that irritates me or not. Let me know if anything irritates you. Maybe we can have a conversation on it or so. But until that time, take care of yourself. It's a wild world out there. Try not to, don't put a lot of energy in it. It takes a lot of energy out of you. I'm not saying you have to love everybody, but have a good
What happened? Where am I? Am I alive yet?